Skinny Hardaway 7T, back with another EP. Y'all do your boy a favor, y'all smash that like button for your boy when you roll on in. Whether you're here for a good time or a long time, I greatly appreciate you sliding through. If it's your first time, do your boy a solid. Don't make it your last time. Hit that subscription button there as well. We talk this good boxing, sports, parlays, prediction, MMA, football, basketball, collegiate, amateur, and professional every single day, not just today. Today, we're here with a boxing EP. These boxing matches go down tomorrow. Today is Wednesday, 11/15. These boxing matches go down 11/16/23. Right? I did the main event to this fight. This is from the Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin De Los Santos card. I also did the Emmanuel Navarrete versus Robson Conceição fight breakdown and prediction. So what I'm doing right now is I'm doing the undercards to those to that main event in that co-main event, because we got some good undercard fights on here that I want to talk about. I know it's other people live right now, right? You could be anywhere in the world right now, but you chose to be right here, and I greatly appreciate it. Could y'all hit that like button, share the video, tell a friend, and we go get right into it. Now, I also threw Diaz and Ornelas in it as well. Floyd Diaz is fighting on this card as well. He's taking on Ornelas. Now, I'm not going to sit here and capture y'all. I don't know a whole lot about the guy that Floyd Diaz is fighting. I do know Floyd Diaz is one of those great prospect, fighters that they have been putting in their face for a while. He's been taking, the step up, the elevation ladder, bit by bit, and he has his biggest test to date, right, with this fight coming up against his opponent now. Now, because I'm not overly familiar, right, with his opponent, I'm not one of those guys who's going to completely throw away, the guy that he's fighting, because I'm unfamiliar with him. Because one thing that I am familiar with, right, is how, the betting system works and how Vegas works. And normally when I go to a Floyd Diaz fight, right, I see, Floyd Diaz with a pretty sizable, advantage, right, as far as who Vegas think is going to win this fight. This time in this particular situation, Floyd Diaz isn't a huge favorite, on the Vegas, in Vegas, right? So that tells me right there, right, that his opponent must be, at least must be better than, this must be a step up fight, Floyd Diaz. Because normally, when I go to Floyd Diaz, him being a prospect, it's like minus 800, minus 900. Now, that means is that Floyd Diaz is supposed to win, that fight pretty easily, right? This fight, Floyd Diaz is about minus 215, which is about 2-1. And we all know 2-1 in the boxing match, right? That's an extremely close fight. Most boxing fights are extremely big odds. So when you get in a boxing match, you get somebody that's 2-1, right? Even like 3-1, right? In boxing, shit, it's even like 4 or 5-1, right? That's a pretty, even fight, right? But this guy that Floyd Diaz is fighting, Floyd Diaz is 9-0, undefeated, 3 KOs, right? No losses, 20 years old, 5'5", with a 64-inch arm reach. He's facing off against Max Ornelas. Max Ornelas is 15-1 with 5 KOs himself. He's 5'9", Now I looked at Max Orleans' resume, right? Now while he doesn't have, the biggest and best names on his resume, I noticed in his last fight he fought Hector Valdez. Hector Valdez was another is another, young prospect coming up in the game. He's pretty good. He got a split decision win over Hector Valdez, right? So you got Floyd Diaz who's stepping in the ring, versus this Ornelas guy, right? So his last fight he himself also was undefeated prospect right before his last fight. So he's facing off against Floyd Diaz, and he's trying to take Floyd Diaz's old at this point, right? I did do my homework on this fight, right? Now this guy Ornelas, now I didn't know a whole lot about him beforehand. I did figure out, some info on him. I did my homework on him, and he's a guy he's a pretty educated boxer, right? You know what I mean? He doesn't he doesn't overly use his jab, right? But he does, use his jab as a bit of a range finder. He does have adequate boxing skills, not not overly powerful in the sense where I think Floyd Diaz will have to worry about that one punch knockout power, or Floyd Diaz will have to go to sleep worrying about, oh man, I hope this guy don't catch me. He don't have that one punch. He don't have that one punch put you in the dirt kind of power, right? When he does get his stoppages, it's like an accumulation of punches that get you up out of there. But he is a fighter who is active. So Floyd Diaz is going to have to find a way to deal with the activity of Ornelas. In this fight, I don't see Ornelas being anything that Floyd Diaz can't handle. Again, Floyd Diaz, like I brought up, how Ornelas uses his jab. I think Floyd Diaz has a lot better jab. Floyd Diaz is a lot more athletic, you know what I mean, than Ornelas. And I think his biggest problem, right, is just going to be with that pressure and that activity of Ornelas. But I think Floyd Diaz should be able to outbox Ornelas in this fight and come away with this victory. Not easy, right? But he should be able to come away with this victory pretty comfortably. This Floyd Diaz versus Ornelas. So in that first fight, right, I got Floyd Diaz in that first fight, right? I got Diaz unanimous decision over Ornelas. I'm about to drop this in the chat for y'all so y'all can see. I got Floyd Diaz unanimous decision over Ornelas. I think he's able to outbox Ornelas, right? Pretty comfortably and get this win. Ornelas did fight, a pretty good competitor, a pretty good prospect in his last fight. He's fighting another pretty good prospect and Floyd Diaz in this fight. And I think Floyd Diaz is going to be able to get the victory and come out victorious. So in the first fight breakdown on the card, I got Diaz unanimous decision over Ornelas. I'm not really sure if this is going to be the opening fight, on the main card, or where this fight is going to be, fall on the order, on the list of orders, right? But this is a fight that I'm interested in seeing. I'm a big fan of Floyd Schofield, right? Been watching him for a minute. Again, this is going to be his first real, right? His first big, I ain't gonna say real, right? This is going to be his first big step up, right? So I'm expecting, him to come in focused and him to get the job done. I got Floyd Diaz unanimous decision over Max Ornelas in that first fight on that Shakur Stevenson undercard, right? So moving right on along, this next fight I want to talk about. Where we gonna go with it? We're gonna go with Brian Norman, right, and Randall. Now, both these guys in this fight, I'm familiar with both of these guys, right? Brian Norman Jr., a name that you may or may not have heard of. His father used to be a boxer as well, Brian Norman Sr. Brian Norman Jr. has had his last couple fights, on the top ranked card. So he's a fighter, right, who has made a couple appearances on top rank. He's facing off. He's facing off against a guy that you may not know, Quinn Randall, right? But just because you don't know this guy, Quinn Randall, doesn't mean that Quinn Randall isn't a game fighter. Quinn Randall is a fighter from the Houston, Texas area. Quinn Randall has sparred with, some of the who he's been around for, a minute, made a pretty decent name for himself on the regional scene, right? You may or may not know Quinn Randall. It's the guy who called out Jamal Charlo at Jamal Charlo's gym, right? Y'all remember that guy? He went to Jamal Charlo's gym that time, and he was like, Jamal Charlo is a cokehead, and I want to fight Jamal Charlo. I repeat, Jamal Charlo is a cokehead. Y'all remember that guy they called Jamal Charlo a cokehead? Quinn Randall. That's Quinn Randall. Quinn Randall is about to take his first big step up fight versus Brian Norman Jr. So we got two guys who on the regional scene has made a great name for themselves, right? Brian Norman Jr. on the bigger scale. But Quinn Randall also has made a name for himself, on the regional scene coming up, right? Which is how you get on ESPN. You don't get on ESPN, right? Because you don't deserve it, right? So this fight with Brian Norman Jr. and Quinn Randall, this is really going to be a good fight, right? And you notice that, right? If you're a betting guy like I'm a betting guy, if you go to the odds, you go to Vegas, you can see that Brian Norman Jr. is about minus 280. Normally, Brian Norman Jr. is also a bigger favorite than that. So you see these guys that you don't know, right? And you think, well, I don't know them, so they must be trash. No, the Ornelas guy that Floyd Diaz is fighting, along with this Quinn Randall guy that Brian Norman Jr. is fighting, not huge fighters by namesake, right? But if you know boxing and you're around boxing, Quinn Randall, I know for sure, right? And Ornelas' name didn't pop out at me, but once I put a name to his face, right, I got to looking at him. I have heard about him on the scene, never seen him fight. This will be the first time I seen Ornelas fight, right? But I have heard about him through the scene. Grail was good. Now the Quinn Randall guy that Brian Norman Jr. is fighting, I do know exactly who that is. I have heard of him. I have seen him fight. Again, I know I recognize him because he's the one that called out, the young boy that called out Jameer Charlo. Well, he getting this step up fight versus Brian Norman Jr. And it's really going to be a banger, man. Quinn Randall is 13-0-1. So he's undefeated, right? He's taking on Brian Norman Jr., who's 24-0, right? Brian Norman Jr. 24-0, 19 KOs, right? His last two fights have went to decision, right? But before that, Brian Norman Jr. was knocking everybody out, right? Quinn Randall 13-0 with 3 KOs, stands 5'11", 33 years old. He's from Katy, Texas, right? This is going to be his first big step up fight versus Brian Norman Jr. He's a guy. He's been on the scene for a minute, right? He's been on the scene for a minute. He's finally getting his chance, right, to fight the who's of the who. This guy Quinn Randall has sparred guys like Caleb Plant. He sparred guys like David Morrell. He sparred guys. Uh, he sparred guys like David Morrell, Caleb Plant. He sparred guys like Demetrius Boo Boo Andrade, right? You know what I mean? He's pretty legit, man. Like he been around for a minute. This ain't gonna be no easy fight, you know what I mean, for Brian Norman Jr. It's some good fights, it's some good bangers on this card. Daniel Berry was good, Grill was good, Demetrius Bright was good. Appreciate y'all folks sliding through this thing, man. If y'all could hit that thumbs up for your boy, let YouTube know that we live, let YouTube know that we getting right. I'm in here talking about, these undercard fight breakdowns that we got coming up tomorrow. I did the main card, right? I did the co-main. So I want to come, rap y'all about the full undercard, right? In the first fight, I got Floyd Diaz, you know what I mean, over Ornelas in the good fight. And now we talking about the second fight on the card, right? Brian Norman Jr. versus Quinn Randall, man. I'm explaining to the people exactly who Quinn Randall is, right? And what he about a little bit. I was just telling everybody how, I know for a fact I didn't see him spar Demetrius Andrade, right? Seen him spar Caleb Plant. You know what I mean? So he's not a guy who is he doesn't have a whole lot of fights, right? But he's the guy who has been getting a whole lot of work, right? He's fighting Brian Norman Jr. He's fighting Brian Norman Jr. Because Brian Norman Jr. is the type of guy who don't turn down no smoke. People have been looking over Quinn Randall not because he can't fight, but the exact opposite. I'm pretty sure at some point, if your favorite fighter is somewhere between 147 between 168, right? At some point, he sparked this Quinn Randall guy. You know what I mean? So Brian Norman Jr. does have a real fight on his hand, right? Again, style a bit. You got Quinn Randall, right? More so of like a pure boxer puncher, not overly powerful, but pure boxer type, right? Skill guy. And you got Brian Norman Jr., right, who was seen as a knockout artist, right? But his last two fights he didn't get the knockout. He had to show off his boxing acumen, his boxing skill in his last couple fights. So Brian Norman Jr., in his last couple fights, he showed you that he does have a bit of a bag, right? And he's not just a knockout guy. I think this very well right here, on the as quiet as kept, right? This fight very well could steal the show, right? Two guys that you haven't heard a lot about, but two guys who I know for a fact are coming to win. Two guys I know for a fact, right, who want to make a name for themselves, and two guys I know for a fact, right, who it took them longer than they feel, right? Most definitely Quinn Randall, right, and Brian Norman, two guys who I know for a fact it took them longer than they feel. It should have took them to get their shot, right, on this big stage. So this is Quinn Randall's first big shot on this stage, right? And this is Brian Norman's chance to prove, to keep moving up the ladder and prove that he belongs in that 147-pound division, because I do think that Brian Norman is going to be a player at 147 eventually. Now let's get into the breakdown a little bit, right? We got Brian Norman, we got Quinn Randall, 13-0 with one draw, 3 KOs. Again, his last fight, he beat a guy named Terry Chatwood. He stopped Terry Chatwood. Terry Chatwood was 12-1, but Terry Chatwood wasn't, like he wasn't like one of, he wasn't like he wasn't like, the best, most known boxer around, right? Pretty solid opponent was Terry Chatwood, right? But Terry Chatwood versus, Brian Norman Jr. is night and day, right? So the resume, going down that resume, a whole lot isn't, well, he got Luis Ramos as well, right? Luis Ramos, pretty skilled fighter. I'm pretty sure y'all know who Ramos is. Ramos is is uh Ramos is most famous for his Olympic. I mean, for his Ramos is most famous for uh his brawl him out kind of style, right? He most famous for losing to Delfino. He just had a fight. Ramos just fought Delfino, right? So he's not a guy that's a pushover. Quinn Randall getting their win over Ramos is a good win, right? It is a good win for him, right? But Ramos is like will be a step down, right? For Brian Norman Jr., but still a good opponent. So Quinn Randall, while he isn't obsolete of, good competition, right? He doesn't have, a list of who's who name of great competition. He got Chatwood, then he got Ramos, right? You got Brian Norman Jr., 24-0, 19 KOs. Brian Norman Jr. is 22. He's facing off against Randall, who is 23, right? So you got a younger guy versus an older guy. In his last fight, he won an 8-round decision win over Jose Perez. And before that, another 8-round decision win over Damian Corb. But before that, he had about a string of like 5 knockouts. Actually, yeah, before he had a string of about like 15 knockouts, right there, Brian Norman Jr. The knockouts kind of had slowed down, right, as he stepped up his competition. In this fight, do I think somebody could get knocked out? I do think somebody could get knocked out. But if somebody's going to get knocked out, I think it'd be Brian Norman knocking out Quinn Randall Jr., right? My heart tells me nobody's going to get knocked out. This is going to be, a solid a boxing match, a tactical boxing match, right? And that's why it's going to be interesting, man, because Quinn Randall is exactly that. They got this Quinn Randall guy. He most definitely can box his ass off. Now we have seen Brian Norman Jr. have to go inside his bag in his last recent fights, right, to show you more of his boxing skills. So he has shown that he possesses the ability to box, and he's not just a knockout artist, which is why this fight is going to get interesting. I'm an avid better, right, with Quinn Randall, right? I bet on Quinn Randall in his last fight. I'm an avid better with Brian Norman Jr. I bet on him in his last fight. I hate when we get, I hate when I get two guys, right, that I like to bet on, they fight each other, but I hate it and I love it, right? Brian Norman Jr. versus Quinn Randall is going to be a tactical boxing match, and whoever can remain focused, right, whoever uses their IQ to the full ability the most, whoever stays disciplined is going to win this fight. This is what you call a 50-50 fight. My guy Demetrius Bright came in. He said he got the underdog Quinn Randall, right? And for some people who may not know Quinn Randall, you may say, man, he go, it's Brian Norman all the way, but it's really not. On paper, Brian Norman is the favorite, and Brian Norman should win. In actuality, this is very well a fight that Brian Norman can lose. Very well a fight that he can lose. I do think this fight is going to come down to skill, right? I think Quinn Randall is skilled. I think Brian Norman Jr. is skilled. But I think Brian Norman's boxing pedigree, him coming from that boxing family. I mentioned how Quinn Randall has fought, a who's who, Demetrius Andrade, Caleb Plant, just to name a few. Brian Norman Jr. has also, been in the ring, young guy, 22, but he's also been in the ring with a list of who's who. He sparred Bud Crawford. He sparred Demetrius Boo not Demetrius Boo Andrade. He sparred Bud Crawford, and he sparred Jerome Booth Ennis. Most famous Brian Norman Jr. is famous for sparring, Bud Crawford. Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't think Brian Norman Jr. sparred EJ. I remember the last time I rapped with him, he said he wanted to spar EJ, but I don't think he sparred EJ. But most famously, Brian Norman Jr. sparred Bud Crawford. Who told y'all Brian Norman Jr. sparred Bud Crawford? It was me. Anyway, but I digress. But Brian Norman Jr. sparred Bud Crawford. Oh, Randall did. Okay, yeah, I can't believe that because Randall is from Texas. I can't believe that because Randall is from Texas. Shout out to Randall. Most definitely, I can't believe he sparred Jamal Charlo too. You know what I mean? Since he sparred Jamal Charlo too. But I digress. But Brian Norman has also sparred, a who's list of who's who who's who, right? So neither of these guys, right, are lacking necessarily the experience, which is why I think it's going to be a good fight again. If you've been paying attention to the prospect scene, right, you had your ear to the street, you know who both of these fighters are, and the fact that they're fighting one another, I think that the fans are going to win. Again, if we going like jab for jab, right? If we going jab for jab, I say these guys about even, man. If we going speed for speed, right? I say it's about even. It's about tit for tat. I do edge Brian Norman with the power, right? I think as far as athleticism goes, normally Brian Norman is a lot more athletic than the guys that he's getting in the ring with, right? I don't think Brian Norman is a lot more athletic than Quinn Randall in this fight, right? I do. If these guys are not on the A game as far as weight, as far as weight, and as far as the tactical aspect of it, both these guys in this thing come up short. Again, this is a 50-50 fight. I'm really undecided on who I think is going to win, but I'm believing, I'm believing that Brian Norman Jr. should be able to pull this out. In worst case scenario, right? Brian Norman Jr. is the A side. So I'm thinking when it comes down to it, Brian Norman Jr. may be the one to get that decision if it's a close fight, if it's a tight fight, right? If we can't decide like who's winning, I'm thinking Brian Norman Jr. since he's A side, he may be more inclined to get that decision. I don't think nobody's getting knocked out, right? So I'm going to lean Brian Norman Jr. in this. I think as far as talent-wise, they may be about even. Brian Norman, slightly more athletic, right? He's the younger fighter by 11 years in this fight. I think that may edge him, right? So I'm thinking Brian Norman Jr. being the A side, the skills are about even. Brian Norman Jr. being slightly more athletic, younger fighter. I think that should be able to push him through over Quinn Randall, but that fight is going to be a banger. That fight is going to be a banger for Brian Norman Jr. and Quinn Randall. So I got Brian Norman Jr. right on the cards, and I got Brian Norman Jr. by split decision. Right, I got Brian Norman Jr. over Quinn Randall, right? But I think it's going to be a split decision win. You know what I mean? I think it's going to be a close fight. This is a big step up fight for Brian Norman Jr. This is going to be the first fight, right? This is going to be the first fight, right, that Brian Norman Jr. steps in. And I'm like, man, I don't know if Brian Norman Jr. is going to come out of here with this win, right? I don't know if Brian Norman Jr. is going to come out of here with this win. This is one of those type fights for Brian Norman Jr. And the fans really are winning by getting it. But I got Brian Norman Jr. split decision win over Quinn Randall, right? So in the first fight, I got Floyd Diaz by unanimous decision over Ornelas. And in the second fight, I got Brian Norman Jr. split decision win over Quentin Randall. So I got Floyd Diaz unanimous decision win, and I got Brian Norman split decision win. Brian Norman decision win, Ornelas decision win. Moving on to the third fight on the EP. Also, the third fight on the undercard. Again, all these fights are on Shakur Stevenson versus all these fights are on Shakur Stevenson versus Edwin De Los Santos card, right? I did the co-main, which is Navarrete and Robson Conceição. I did the main event, Shakur and Edwin De Los Santos himself. This is the prelim. We're going Diaz versus Ornelas, and I got Diaz. And we're doing Brian Norman Jr. versus Quentin Randall. I got Brian Norman Jr., right? And last but not least, we got Troy Isley versus Vladimir Hernandez. Again, this is another fight, right? And for this is another fight where it's a prospect going up against a guy, right, that we're not really sure if he's going to win, right? Vladimir Hernandez, right? You may hear that name and you may think, I don't know that dude. But just for reference, right, real quick, Vladimir Hernandez is ranked higher than Troy Isley is right now. So Troy Isley is fighting up in rankings to fight Vladimir Hernandez. So shout out Troy Isley for, stepping up. Vladimir Hernandez is 14-5 with 6 KOs. His most storied fight, right, as of recently, right, he just beat Lorenzo Truck Simpson. Y'all know Truck Simpson? Hernandez is the guy that took Truck Simpson's oath. Not only did he beat Truck Simpson, he also beat Julian J. Rod Williams, Vladimir Hernandez. This is the same Vladimir Hernandez that beat Truck Simpson. This is the same Vladimir Hernandez that beat Julian Williams, right? This is the same Vladimir Hernandez that lost to Jesus Ramos, right? So Hernandez has been in there with, the who's who of boxing. He's not a fighter. He's not a fighter who's gonna lack experience, right? Or he's not a fighter who's gonna lack. He said, wasn't there a Tony Isley on the Jazz years ago? Troy Isley. Now I ain't really sure. You know what I mean? But I digress. So he's not a guy who lacks experience, right? He's not a guy who's going to be starstruck, right? Or who the moment's going to be too big for him. He fought Jesus Ramos Jr. He beat Julian J. Rod Williams, right? And he beat Lorenzo Truck Simpson. He also lost to Suleiman Sissoko, right? So he's been in there with champions, right? He's been in there with multiple champions, and he's beaten, you know what I mean? And he's beaten, Julian J. Rod Williams, who's a former champion. His last fight, he just beat Lorenzo Truck Simpson, right? So let that sink in, right? Let that sink in. Vladimir Hernandez, 14 wins, 5 losses, right? He's facing off against Troy Isley. Troy Isley is an undefeated prospect, right, from Ohio. Just one of the great young prospects that came out of Ohio in this most recent, in this most recent Olympic circuit, right? With Troy Isley, Duke Reagan, Tyler Johnson, those guys, that little circle, that whole little circle, them Ohio boys, Dante Benjamin Jr., Big Baby Anderson too as well, right? Them Ohio boys, Troy Isley is one of those Ohio boys. They got scooped up out of that national circuit. Troy Isley is 10-0 with 4 KOs, right? 25-year-old young man. His last fight was against Antonio Todd, right? Fight before that was against Roy Barnier. He hasn't had that breakout step up fight just yet. He hasn't had that breakout step up fight just yet. Did Troy Isley? This will be considered his first breakout step up fight. Vladimir Hernandez, shout out my guy D Bright, right? Hernandez is coming off a win over Truck Simpson in that fight, right? So Vladimir is hot right now. He's not coming in here to lose that fight. Truck Simpson was a young prospect, riding high, undefeated, vicious puncher, right? Hernandez, he took that, he wielded, and he ended up getting a split decision. Truck Simpson, I don't want to say the moment was too big for Truck Simpson, right? But the adjustments that Truck Simpson needed to make in that fight, Hernandez made it real hard for him to make it, man. He was on them constant pressure, and he ended up getting a split decision. Could have went either way, but Hernandez ended up getting a split decision over Chuck Simpson. So Troy Isley is going to have to come, on his A game. Hernandez, he's a guy who he literally beats you. He's all guts, all heart, all will, all activity. Never stops punching, never stop moving forward. If you're not coming in there right and you don't got yourself right physically, you're going to get beat. He got beat by Julian. He beat Julian J. Rod Williams not because he better than him, right, but just because on midnight he wanted a little bit more than Julian J. Rod Williams. He wouldn't stop. He was able to sneak out that decision over Chuck Simpson, right, because of that gas tank. This dude just never stopped. Troy Isley if Troy Isley wants to win this fight, Troy Isley is going to have to be aware. Troy Isley is going to have to be on his A game. And he's going to have to be in great physical condition. You know what I mean? To beat this guy. He said, "What's the fights on tonight, Skinny? The fights tonight are on Fight TV. That fight card starts at about 7. They're on Fight TV. They're either on Fight TV or they're going to be on YouTube Pro Box. I think it's a Fight TV card. But check YouTube, check Pro Box on YouTube just in case, right? Matter of fact, y'all can check that gen right now. Somebody check Pro Box on YouTube, see if they got fights tonight. But the fight tonight going to be on Fight TV, I think. But they may show them on YouTube Pro Box. But I digress. Hernandez beat J Rock. He beat Chuck Simpson. He's coming. He's gonna try to beat Troy Isley. Troy Isley has that pure boxing style. If you look at Troy Isley's physique, right, his size, you would think Troy Isley is supposed to be knocking people out. Actually, when you look at Troy Isley fight, how hard he punched people, you would think what's good, true. Oh yeah. You would think the way that Troy Isley punched people, right, how hard he punched people, you would think that he would be, he would get more knockouts. But Troy Isley is a good pure boxer. He's never flustered. He's never shaken up. He's never shaken up. In this fight, I'm taking Troy Isley to beat Hernandez, right? But I think it's going to be the toughest fight of Troy Isley's career. With the style that Troy Isley fight, right? I do think that Troy Isley may be able to get a knockout over Hernandez in this fight, given the style. Troy Isley doesn't have a whole lot of knockouts, right? But because of the style of this fighter, Hernandez, and he's constant pressure, he's either going to, beat you up for 12 rounds and end up getting that victory over you because he doesn't have a whole lot of power. Troy Isley does have some adequate power, hasn't really had a chance to really show it, right? Just yet, right? But I think this fight, he has a good chance to be able to stop Hernandez because of Hernandez's style. I'm taking Troy Isley in this fight, and I'm taking Troy Isley by stoppage over Hernandez. I know Hernandez is coming off their win, right, over Lorenzo Chuck Simpson. I think Troy Isley is aware of that, and he know that he gonna be on his A game with his style. I think his style is going to get him in a little trouble with Troy Isley. I got Troy Isley knocking out, man. But I'm not gonna hold y'all up in this thing too long. I'm gonna let this thing go 4 more minutes because I know we got to get them plays in. I actually already got some plays in. The Wednesday night fight start at 7 o'clock, right? So I want to give myself a little time to go get ready for that, right? I want to give myself a little time, to get ready for that. Although I already made some, right? I got to get in where I fit in on what's going on right now. So I greatly appreciate everybody sliding through. Y'all make sure y'all slide back just to get y'all right. Let me put this in the chat. I got Troy Isley. Stoppage. I got Troy Isley stoppage, right? Win over Hernandez in that fight. Troy Isley stoppage win. If you're asking me around, I think it's going to go. Y'all know Abdullah Mason go win his fight. Shout out my guy Greg. Greg, Abdullah Mason go win that fight, man. That's why I ain't even bother doing it, right? I ain't even go come in here and break down Mason and Cardenas because Mason go whoop his ass, right? He more than likely he go stop him. If you get that Mason boy more rounds than 4, everybody go get stopped at this point that they put him in the ring with, right? But yeah, of course, I got Abdullah Mason for the win. I got Abdullah Mason for the win. He said Watson out, damn bad luck, right? But for sure Abdullah Mason for the win. But just to give y'all a rundown, right? On the first fight, right? We got Diaz versus Ornelas. I got Diaz unanimous decision over Ornelas. Right? I think he wins that fight pretty comfortably, right? In the second fight, we got Brian Norman Jr. versus Quentin Randall. I think Brian Norman Jr. wins a tight fight. I don't think he gonna be comfortable at all in that fight. I think he gonna have to dig down and go win that fight, go take that fight from Quentin Randall, right? I like that fight a lot. I think that fight is going to be close all the way through. You got two tactical pure boxers who Brian Norman has their punching power, right? Last couple fights haven't ended on knockout, but has that punching power. So I think he's more so locked in on his, boxing ability that he does so great. And I think there's going to be a tactical battle between two fighters. And I think Brian Norman Jr. is able to edge it out and get the win. And then that third fight, he said Mason getting too big for 135, right? Already, right? And then that third fight, we got Troy Isley stoppage win over Vladimir Hernandez. Again, Vladimir Hernandez is not no scrub, so don't see me say stoppage and think, oh yeah, Troy Isley got this in the bag. This dude just beat Lorenzo Truck Simpson, and it's the same dude that beat Julian J. Rod Williams, right? So understand Vladimir Hernandez is not a joke. It's real spill, not a drill. Troy Isley is one to have to get right. And the reason I'm taking him for knockout is the exact opposite of the reason that I'm taking him knockout right is the exact opposite of it being an easy fight. I'm taking him by knockout because I think the guy that he fighting style is going to lead him to get knocked out. But if Troy Isley come in there playing, Troy Isley could get, beat the fuck up and possibly stop, right? But I don't think that Troy Isley is going to get stopped. I think Troy Isley is going to have his mind right. He know that this guy just beat Lorenzo Truck Simpson, right? So I think he coming in on his A game, and he going to be able to go in there and get the job done. And I think because of Hernandez's style, right, because he's always coming forward, I believe that he's going to be able to get the stoppage in this fight. But again, I ain't going to hold y'all too long. Y'all make sure y'all catch me on the other side. We about to come turn up for the night shift. Make sure y'all share this video. Tell a friend and tell a friend. We talk this good boxing every single day. Not just today, skin the hard way, studying T. This ain't the past. This ain't the future. Just the present. That's how you rocking. And I'm out. Love.